Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, April 4th, 2025, and today we're going to talk about damping off, farming like you're old, and it's Feedback Friday, so let's do it. All right, well, happiest of Fridays to everyone. We are still in the middle of a very wet, potentially catastrophically wet spell here in Kentucky and surrounding areas. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see what it looked like yesterday before we got the bulk of our rain. So, it is very wet here. I honestly can't remember a rainfall quite like this, and hoping my farmer friends are safe and well. The rain is not supposed to fully stop for a couple more days, so keep this area in your thoughts. Shouts to all of those of you who have reached out to check in. We're good, but I don't know that I've seen this area a whole lot more wet than it is right now. Brutal way to start the season. Sending our love to the farms dealing with flooding and other damage. Hoping for a swift recovery for everyone. Okay, so it's Friday, which means Feedback Friday, where we explore what you all were saying about this week's topics. On Monday, we discussed retirement, and I'm actually going to save a lot of that part of the conversation for the end of this episode, but we also discussed different ways to passively manage greenhouse heating, and I liked this from @MKY8353, who wrote, quote, "I've been doing compost heating for my greenhouse the past 2 seasons. And has worked well. I definitely don't recommend in-house composting though. Had tried that and all plants in the greenhouse turned yellow and had a funky smell in the greenhouse. But outside of the greenhouse with drain piping ran through it and into the greenhouse works great. Plus you get that nice broken down pile of compost to use for springtime planting." End quote. Thanks. And sure, I think there is certainly room for a sort of, detached compost furnace under the right design. May as well do something with that heat when you can, right? And I've heard similar things about composting in the greenhouse to what you sort of observed. Again, I had a friend kill all of their tomato plants off that way by having them in the greenhouse with and trying to use compost to heat that greenhouse. So it either has to be really well designed, or I would probably just skip trying to do composting inside of your greenhouse. Then on Tuesday, we had discussed asparagus and why market gardeners don't grow it that much. And @Trogdor8, I said that right, wrote, quote, "It's not just time. Asparagus yield is 1,000 to 4,000 pounds, depending on variety, per acre per year in densely packed rows, if everything goes right after 8 years of maturation, spread out over 8 weeks of harvest. This translates to 1 to 3 pounds in a 32 square foot bed, spread out over 8 weeks of harvest. At 4 to 5 years, you're only getting about a third of that. This is a great big nothing, especially for a low-calorie crop. An appreciable amount of asparagus in your diet demands you plant an entire hedgerow of the stuff dedicated to that crop, thoroughly weeded for years and years. Compare that to the Aldi price of $2 a pound. You also can't even eat more than 2/3 of that, the rest being woody stem." End quote. Yeah, those numbers seem actually about right. I could see some estimates getting up to 5,500 pounds per acre, but even that at 200 square foot bed, which is what we have, at peak yield may only yield 25 pounds. So depending on the yield and the labor involved, asparagus is not among the more profitable crops. Even if you're, that said, you should be charging significantly more than $2 per pound. Organic asparagus is going for $4 to $8 a pound in bigger box stores like Whole Foods, and I would probably have $8 be my absolute lowest number, especially at a farmer's market. Small $2 quarter pound bunches would help to spread that price out, or even $2.50 a bunch. But even then, considering it a profitable enough crop to take up that amount of space, it's a tough sell. But also it's delicious, so I wouldn't blame anyone who justifies an asparagus patch by just saying we're going to grow a bunch of it and then have some for ourselves and sell what we can. Sometimes you got to grow the stuff you love, but that's why you don't see it very much in market gardens. On Wednesday, we talked about celery production, and I liked this question from @DivineThomas421, who wrote, quote, "If the celery is positively photoblastic," I love that term. "If the celery is positively photoblastic, how does it germinate if it is pelleted and the light can't get to it? Thanks." End quote. Good and interesting question. So celery takes at least a couple weeks to germinate, and the clay coating is usually gone in a week or so. So I suppose that's kind of how it works, but I had honestly never really thought about it. I do get just as good a germination though with pelleted versus non-pelleted. So for whatever reason, the coating is not anti-positively photoblastic. So yeah, also liked this from at Caleb Reedman 5056, who asked, quote, I would love to know how you keep your celery looking fresh at market. I find it wilts fast in the heat and then looks horrible. Any tips, tricks, end quote. So yeah, celery bunches are not the easiest thing to keep looking fresh. Similar to chard and kale bunches, we like a big pile on the table in the shade. Make sure it's shaded. If it's in the sun, that's a problem. But a big pile on the table to kind of hold the coolness in, just like that mass from the cooler. And then we will swap the ones on top with the ones from the middle of that pile, or we'll just bring it directly out of the cooler, like the small coolers that we bring to market with us that have ice packs in them. We will also mist them often with a mister to keep the stalks looking as fresh as possible throughout the day. Regular, near constant stocking and restocking from the cooler makes a huge difference in how stuff looks on your table. Being at market is just absolute all the time work. It's never just set it up and sit and sell it all. You have to just constantly be moving stuff in and out of your coolers and keeping it looking fresh. Also, Trish3580 asked if it was too late to start celery, and generally no. But if you're in a colder climate, you would probably at this point want to plan to grow it inside of a high tunnel or something, just to make sure that you get the most amount of yield out of it as possible, or look for one with a smaller data maturity. But for most of us in North America, it's not too late. You can still grow your celery. Then yesterday we talked about old manures, and you all got to meet our new editor, Mike, for the first time, who I should say got here from Utah this week and walked immediately into a week of tornado warnings and floods as a warm welcome to the Bluegrass State. So that's fun. But I thought this was helpful from at William Brown 9341, who wrote, quote, Hi, Mike. If you read me, it seems that a decent part of the horse dung could be close to the initial stage, meaning has dried early and or without a moist pile phase. Your material does not look like a paddocked one where the horses stomp and pee on it. I bet that you could get that pile through a heating process. To get it moist would be a key, but dry dung is not easy to wet. I use the jet mode on the hose end sprayer to unpack the fibers of the dung. It is just that this method is kind of a take it easy long time job, end quote. Yeah, getting old manure wet can definitely be a chore, and the photos of Mike's manure look more dry than I had imagined them, I guess. Getting it wet may take a few days of consistent watering in a pile, or just pile it and wait for a flood week like we're having. It's presto. Huge thanks, as always, to everyone who chimes in with all of your thoughts and opinions and ideas. And I love the diversity of commenters and comments that we get. And this audience is just awesome. So thank you all for being the best all the time. All right, up next, we're going to talk about damping off in the greenhouse, which is notably not a euphemism or Britishism for napping, but kind of feels like it could be. BRB. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Farmhand. Newsletters, right? A necessary evil for CSA farmers. Join Farmhand and real CSA farmers on April 11th for a free digital workshop where they'll share strategies they use to turn their newsletters into powerful sales tools. Get the secrets and go-to templates for success when you register for the free workshop today at farmhand.partners/newsletter. That's farmhand.partners/newsletter. And I'll put the link in the show notes. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere the questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Nathan Lau Crisp, who writes, quote, Hey, Jesse, I was listening the other day to John Kempf's podcast named Podcast Extra, Ask Me Anything with John Kempf from February 13th. There was one question asked about damping off of seedlings, and John mentioned that he used a sugar water solution to address damping off. I have a couple of questions to go with this. Have you used or heard of using things like this before? Does this work? Can this be used as a preventative? Could this or something else like this be useful anywhere else? And when can we get some more content between you and John or one of the other agronomists from AEA? That would be very, very interesting conversation here, and you all pick one another's brains and deep diving into important agricultural topics, agronomy, Jadam, SAP analyses, answering questions, and etc. Keep up the good work, end quote. All right, great questions, Nathan. Okay, so first, yeah, John is a friend, and I'm always delighted to run into him at conferences and such. He's a very warm and thoughtful person, as you all can probably tell from his podcast. Has a great laugh, very fun to hang out with. As Nathan mentioned, we've been on each other's shows before, and I will link those episodes in the show notes. And that way, for those of you who are not familiar with the Regenerative Agriculture podcast, you can check it out. It's great. John is super brilliant, and it's super nerdy agricultural stuff every week on that show. It's really fun. Great work, and would happily and probably will do more with John in the future. And to that point, once Mike and I are settled into the editorial process and comfortable and get things back to where we want them to be, I would like to get back to having more interviews/guest hosts for this show, probably closer to the fall when farmers are starting to be a little bit less busy, but that's the idea. Just been sort of hard to work that stuff in with the immense amount of work that this show requires, but soon enough, especially possible and thanks to your all support. Anyway, so I had not heard that treatment for damping off before. For the uninitiated, if you've ever had a tray of seedlings just starting to die off in the greenhouse with a moldy slime look or feel to it, that's damping off. There are a few different diseases that can cause it, such as fusarium and pythium and a couple others. It's all basically the product of poor ventilation, poor soil mix that does not have enough of the aeration component, and or too much moisture on the young leaves. The crops that we've found are most susceptible to it are things like beets and spinach and some legumes, but it can get others as well. It's a pretty common greenhouse problem. Our solution has always kind of just been better airflow and to bottom water those crops versus top watering with a sprayer over top of them. That has more or less solved the issue for us. Now, what I have not tried is treating the plants once they have, damping off. So John's recommendation is interesting. He suggests, quote, a foliar application of a light dosage of sugar, and you could stop damping off like flipping a switch with a small application of sugar. Why? Because the sugar application did two things. One, it changed the sugar and energy levels of the seedlings. They had higher sugar content. More importantly, that's the secondary effect of that is that that light dosage of sugar stimulated other microbes, and those other microbes suppressed pythium and prevented pythium from becoming a problem and causing damping off, end quote. He goes on to say other growers have tried and have had success with this procedure. So if you're in the midst of damping off, that may be worth a try. But also make sure that within any greenhouse production that you're doing, that you always are maintaining good airflow. We have a fan in our greenhouse. It's just a box fan, but the bigger the greenhouse, the better the fans have to be. And then we keep the doors open. We open them every day. Just good airflow is essential. Don't water from over top for certain crops or for most of your crops if you can help it. Use a really good soil mix as well. I think that makes a huge difference. Anyway, John's done great work, and a lot of people have had success following his guidance, so it's worth checking out his company, Advancing Eco-Agriculture, not a sponsor, past or present, but it's much more ecologically and microbially based soil management solutions rather than chemical-based, so love their work. His podcast is also an absolute gem. Great resource. I hope that answers your question, Nathan, and otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, farm like you're old. Be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Rimmel Greenhouses.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or your family's harvest, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment that you need for a harvest that you can count on. Rimmel greenhouses are designed for durability and offer the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Visit rimmelgreenhouses.com to get a quote today.
If I may editorialize for a second, I own a Rimmel tunnel. I love it. We built it ourselves, and I really appreciated the quality of the tunnel as well as the customer service we received in the process. So make sure to check them out. Okay, so with this last segment, I wanted to share some of the themes from various comments we got on the retirement segment from Monday, and just share some general thoughts on farming now, like mobility and strength are already a little harder on you. Basically, give you some advice I refused to hear early on. First, though, on the retirement segment, there were a few main themes in the comments. The first was just sort of a grow until I die sentiment, summed up nicely here by Lamb's Quarters Farms, quote, as nuts as it sounds, growing is my life, so I have no plan to retire, maybe scale back, but I'll be growing until I'm compost fodder for a cool tree that I'll start with the laughing until I cry emoji, end quote. So obviously this was said a bit in jest and refers not to savings, but to activity, but the sentiment was shared by several people. Many people have no interest in retiring, which is fine, because for some, farming is the retirement. That's the retirement plan for many growers. They don't really want to do anything else. And in terms of activity, that's fine. I love that. Like I said in the episode, retirement is about doing what you want to do in your closing years. And for many farmers, farming is what they want to do, including myself. I want to farm absolutely as long as I can. I have no interest in stopping. But it still has to be dealt with in the financial sense as well. Retirement does. As I have said before, I think, we live a whole lot longer than we expect to live. Just when we're young, we can't conceive of how long we're actually going to live. And accidents can happen, and bodies can get worn down, even under good management. Retirement in a financial sense, in other words, isn't always a choice, and it can't fall on your children or families to take care of you should things go south. That's not entirely fair. At Andrew Keeler, 4060, tapped into this as well and added a little more sort of, historical perspective. Quote, personally, I do not think that we were created to retire. Yes, there may come a time when one can't provide or care for themselves, but until then, I feel it is important to first take care of our daily needs through our lifestyle and not from monetary buildup, and secondly, invest in that community and family that will care for you when you cannot, end quote. I absolutely agree that we were not meant to store a bunch of cash and retire. This would have been an absolutely absurd notion throughout much of human history. Communities used to be the social safety net, and there are many stories of indigenous Americans being absolutely stunned by people being left to starve in the streets of the cities when they would go visit them. But also, the need for retirement accounts is the world we currently live in unless we want to work to change it. But also, while we work to change it, it's still the world we live in. It's gross and depressing, but it's true. And speaking of gross, perhaps, is what Andrew and others express concerns with when it comes to investing. No one really wants to loan their money to large corporations whose ethics are diametrically opposite of their own, ecologically, socially, etc. There are not a lot of great options in this realm, but there are a few. There are what are called socially responsible investing opportunities out there. These are called SRI. There are clean energy ETFs, that sort of stuff, certain bonds. Not a ton of stuff, but some. And there is a podcast, in fact, I will listen to occasionally called Investing in Regenerative Agriculture that I'll link in the show notes, where the host works on ways to get investors investing in ecological agriculture. So sometimes opportunities could pop up there. But absolutely, this is an area where you can see the challenge of the modern economy. We live in an economy based almost purely on extraction and rarely, to be generous, on any sort of reciprocation. In other words, companies who take the most and give the least amount back to their environment or their communities are often the most profitable and valuable. There is just not a ton of money in protecting or enriching the environment, not nearly as much as there is in just completely devouring it until it's gone. I don't know how you solve this exactly, but I think there is a lot of room for creativity in this realm. For instance, at Ian HB8 WJ had asked about opportunities that are not major stock indices or speculative real estate, and I think there is still room for ecologically minded farmers in these spaces. For instance, those with perhaps carpentry skills, fixing up and flipping old buildings to keep them in use and help prevent more farmland from being developed. Or perhaps someone can create some regenerative farmer ETFs that invest strictly in environmentally responsible companies and do so with enough buying power to have say in the direction of said companies, which I admit would probably require a couple bazillion dollars to start, but the idea is there. I'd be curious what, if any, additional ideas you all have come up with or found to feel better or possibly proud about your investing and retirement savings. But the one thing I definitely don't want is for people to ignore their future because they loathe the current system. Like at Bruce Glider wrote, quote, "I've worked in the financial services industry for 38 years and I've been predicting a wave of senior poverty in the US. It's going to be heartbreaking and cause lots of social upheaval," end quote. I don't know what's going to happen, but I don't feel good about the future. It feels a little bleak in that way. And I just hope that I can help farmers respect that eventuality enough to, at very least, start taking it seriously. Maybe it won't just lead to better social safety nets for ourselves, but a change to the system where our retirement funds also help fund a better future, because that would be cool. Because I believe you can be idealistic and work for change while also being cautious and financially responsible at the same time. Those things do not have to be mutually exclusive. As for preparing for a less mobile time as a farmer, this is something I think about increasingly, and it really should permeate every system you design. And I think the easiest way to do that is to ask ourselves, could I do this if my knees were bad? Presumably from all the awesome skateboarding and soccer you did as a youth. Or is this a system I could easily teach someone else to do without too much trouble? How could I simplify it, make it more efficient, reduce the number of steps. Someone once told me to farm like you're old, put stuff on wheels, reduce the number of things you or someone else could trip on, stay simple and organized. I talked a lot about this in the fall, I think, but getting fruit trees established so that at least some of my work can be done standing up has been a big part of my aging plan as well. I can't, at least on my own, be doing everything from my knees forever. Every year, it's a little harder to get up and down. Plus, back to the retirement piece, certain perennials can be a part of your retirement plan too. Having a crop that will take several years to mature, at which point it will produce with less effort than like annual crops. That doesn't sound too dissimilar to an IRA, just like a physical one, and that tastes good. So anyway, let me know your thoughts on any and all of that. And otherwise, we're going to call it a show and a week. Sending our love to those of you going through the flooding right now in our region. The rain just never seems to let up on some of these communities anymore. Really brutal stuff. Don't forget, we are now officially a 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That is an easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and the team at No-Till Growers. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Let it all go. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or the Seed Farmer at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of April, you get a big shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Alex and Oliver, Stacy Moorman, Bill King, Chris Yates, so our weeklies, Dawn, and Loke Nielsen. Loke's a cool name. All right, so this is a weekly reality show that follows these various, let's call them farmers, sort of farmers, who start their own sort of lawn mowing businesses, but they do it with goats and sheep and other ruminants spread out all over the country. And one of the things that's interesting is they sort of just catalog the sort of challenges and rewards of, people paying them to do their yard maintenance with ruminants. And it's called The Lamb Mowers. I binged it. It was great. Very inspiring. Yeah, lots of challenges that come along with keeping goats in a single yard. Anyway, you all have a great week. Thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you on Monday. Bye.